teachers actually sit together and plan together.
The challenge that we have is always going to be,
so we create the thing that the student can learn together.
That gives more distance and time.
Do you want to continue even the project is end?
What is so good about lesson study?
Help children think in English language lessons.
It doesn't matter in any subject.
That's up to school.
We have mixed groups of teachers.
Teacher needs to shut your mouth.
All right, so welcome to our Center of Excellence podcast. It's a great honor to host three of you here. First of all, I would introduce my guests today. So we have two representatives of a Kaen University from Thailand. It's Professor Maitri and Ak. So thank you so much for coming, and we hope that you enjoy your stay in Kazakhstan.
Yes,
and
sure.
We have Professor Jonom Майнотом from Aberdeen University. So again, thank you so much for finding time and coming here to our podcast. It's very important for us that you are here with us today. So let's dive in. And the first question that I ask all my guests here, the participants of the conference, how did you find out about lesson study? So what's your story? If possibly, maybe briefly a little bit, how did you find out about lesson study? Why do you do lesson study? Why do you believe in lesson study? So what's your story?
So who should do? Me? Okay. For me, when I was young, I studied at Japan from first grade to sixth grade.
Wow.
So yes, and then I came back to Thailand, and I have a Thai education.
Yeah.
And when I have to go to work, I have opportunity to translate in lesson study project to be they call APEC. So they invite the Japanese teacher to teach Thai students. So I can speak Japanese, so I go to be a translator between a Japanese teacher and student. And I have interested in how they teach through the lesson study, and they use the problem solving.
Yeah.
And then I participate for many times, and now I am one of the specialists in educator in IRTP, Kaen University. That brief story.
All right, so you have a long story that started when you were at school as a student, just translating, and that's where when you get the first knowledge. But when you started in Japan, did you feel that something was going on, that was lesson study popular in your school when you were a student in Japan?
I was just 6 years old, so I done what teacher said. So I maybe not mention that it was but through the lesson study or anything, but I just enjoy the education in Japan.
All right. Okay. So what's your story, Professor?
Yes, in my case, I first went to Japan in 1988. It's long times ago. Yeah. And I visited a number of schools in Japan around the Nagoya city. At that time, I was a teacher trainee, spent 1 year and a half in Japan. That's my first experience exposed to a Japanese lesson study. Then I returned back to Thailand, and 3 years later I went to Japan again for my master and my PhD in mathematics education. So totally I spent around 10 years in Japan. And I returned back to Thailand in 1999. This was the year that we started the education reform in my country. So we are looking forward to respond to the national agenda, how we can reform the teachers and student learnings. So I think what I have experienced in Japan can be implemented in Thailand. So I'm started to implement the lesson study in Thailand. But because I've been in Japan for many years, so I know that Japanese lesson study is a part of a school culture in Japan. So it's not easy to copy this kind of things to my country. So I laid out some context in Thailand and try to start a long journey to transform a Japanese lesson into Thailand. So far is 25 years already. So we have I can say that we have innovative models of transformative lesson study incorporated open approach in Thailand.
All right, thank you. John, how about you?
Yes, less exciting, less Japan, unfortunately. But I guess the way I discovered lesson study was through a problem. So I was a principal of an elementary school, and I wanted a way to help my teachers learn from each other, but also learn from other people. And through reading and thinking about different ways that we could do that together, I came across lesson study and read around lesson study that was happening across the world at that time, and then implemented as part of my doctoral degree while also being a principal lesson study in my school, and then explored some of the problems that come from lesson study as well as some of the solutions. And that's led me then to the university, and now working with more teachers on collaboration and lesson study across the UK and Scotland.
So if you could name one good reason why you think that lesson study is a great tool, so you're still doing it, so you're not giving up. So what is so good about lesson study? Maybe each one of you would bring like one argument or one thing that you like about it.
Okay, may I start?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
When we do the lesson study, teachers come together and think about the plan. So it's very exciting when you try to anticipate the student, and when you go to the class, it doesn't go that way. I mean, students think the other way. So that's kind of, this is my thought, not the student thoughts, and this is quite challenge when you do the lesson study, then trying to anticipate the student's idea.
Yeah. But you are naming the challenge, not the good thing about lesson study. So that's what makes lesson study difficult, isn't it?
No. Because you don't need to be success, or I mean, you need to repeatedly. So that's the good thing, that you can come together and try to fix the plan, try to revise the plan every time from what you saw, you experience in the classroom.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I just that you have to challenge yourself as well, right? And that's not easy process, but could be very satisfying. So how about you, Professor?
In my case, because I have a long experience in teaching at a school in Thailand, so when I started my career to teaching mathematics, as you know, student doesn't like mathematics, because we as a teachers usually only deliver the knowledge to our student. But in contrast, in Japan, when we do a lesson study, meaning that the spirit, to my knowledge, the spirit of lesson study, teacher learning together to understand the student. So it is completely from what I teach mathematics to my student. That I think that's the good things. But the way we teacher working together is very challenging. When I return back to my country, how can these things happen in the school? Then I create an idea how teachers can work together. I start what I'm called a weekly cycles of learning. I'm create three basic steps of lesson study. Generally plan to see, and then create another 4 step of the way we teaching we teach through problem solving. I call open approach. I modified the Japanese open approach, and then I incorporate the 4 step of teaching approach in the 3 basic steps of lesson study and create a weekly cycle. So this is the foundation so that the teacher can really work and learning together. That the ideas is, I think, is interest me.
Okay, so that's interesting, and then I will ask you the question about this other cycle that you created after John responds.
Yeah, so it's very difficult to think of one thing.
Yeah.
So I think I decided the thing that I think is the most valuable from lesson study is the fact that it's going to give you something from the process. Now that might be, as my esteemed colleagues have said, mathematical knowledge or detailed knowledge around the children and the learning. But I think it's interesting to see what teachers get from it in terms of teachers themselves. So for some teachers, it will be a sense of empowerment that they can take difficult questions and learn from that. For some of them, that makes them become principals themselves or leaders of their own schools. And for others, it's the ability to know that they can go to a colleague and ask a question and it isn't a weakness in their teaching. So I think for me, the thing that lesson study gives teachers is a shared safety to understand that actually as all professionals working together, we can be more powerful when we work in collaborations like lesson study than when we work on our own.
Yeah. I have a question to all of you, but maybe John in particular, because you were a principal, or maybe are you now a principal?
No, I now work at the university full-time.
Oh, all right. So maybe you also have the experience of being a principal at school.
No, I'm just only teaching.
All right. Okay, so then for John, but anyway for you as well. So how important do you think it is that the leader of the school, the principal of the school, is aware of the idea of lesson study, or can the teachers deal with it by themselves, or do they need really the person who is like pushing them? Or
I think you need a key person. The principal probably has to be involved in some way, but they can be just giving permission, and then the key person can like run the program of lesson study. But I think if the leader is not involved, it can be very difficult because there's schedules to think about, there's the timing of a cycle, there's the resourcing of those. If teachers want to see a lesson live together, then only the principal really can make that happen without any real pressure. So I think we have to remember lesson study does cost money. And so the principal is ultimately responsible for the budget as well. So I think the more I think about it, the more important I think the leader of the school is, and that they have to be supportive of lesson study if it's really going to flourish well.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think? Do you agree?
Yes. The idea that I created, the weekly cycles, the school principal play a very crucial role in the weekly cycles. Usually the school in Thailand we call the expansion school, meaning that they extend the 6-year primary schools for another 3 years for junior high school. So we create like 3 team of lesson study for grade 1 to 3 for to create 1 team, and then 4, 5, 6 another teams, and then junior 1 to 3 for another. So at least we have 3 team in school in Thailand. So each team they work together during the week, but by the end of the week we assign the school principal to take a leadership for the post discussion or do reflection by the end of the week. So they plan the lessons every week together and then teach at the schedules, and then come to the end of the week and then do the reflections and create a weekly cycles. So I think they play, the school principal play a very, very crucial role to sustain the weekly cycles of the learning.
Mm-hmm. You agree?
Yeah, same Thai context.
Yeah, the same there. Yeah, because in Kazakhstan we had this case that when we first represented the idea of lesson study, we represented it to teachers, not to the principals. And the teachers started lesson study, but then they realized that they have lots of obstacles, that the principals wouldn't understand what the teachers were doing. And then they were like, we need principals to understand what we're doing. So we started the courses for principals to teach them that lesson study is a great idea, and so they get not only financial or like schedule-wise support, but some moral support, like yes, you guys, you can do it. Because sometimes it is difficult for the lesson study group to start and to finish, because sometimes they feel that this is too challenging or taking too much time, and they think, okay, let's just give up. And the principal is the person, like the leader, who can, somehow inspire them to finish, to go to this finish line. All right. So about your weekly cycles, don't you think, well, I don't know how it works really, but isn't it like too intensive when every week they have to plan a lesson and do a research lesson? How does it work for teachers?
Yes, is as always, people keep asking me about why you doing lesson study every week. But we have a context that most of our school teachers have a strong belief to cover every topics of the content you see in the curriculum. So when we assign them to do some other things, maybe they have the problem with how to manage time. So in order to solve this problem, then okay, let's do lesson study every week so that we can cover every topic they are going to teach according to the curriculum. So in order to solve this problem, we do translate a Japanese mathematics textbook so that we can support our teachers to do lesson study every week, so that in this so it cover every topic when we do every week.
So the way you do it is that the teachers actually sit together and plan together the math lesson, and that's how they know the next topic is covered and it's discussed, and it's kind of easier in a way, right?
And in the lesson study teams, not only the school teachers, as I mentioned, like grade 1, 2, 3, we have create one team, but we put our student teachers. We because I was at the Faculty of Education, then we work closely with this collaborative school, and then we send our student teacher. They have to do internship for 1 year at the school. So we put the students teachers in that team. Working together.
Yeah. That's a great idea. So John, what about Scotland context?
Well, I was thinking we're probably more flexible about how lesson study is being done. So I think it depends on the problem that you're looking at, or the question you have in your lesson study cycle. So some lesson studies can all happen within 1 week, the actual active part. And some lesson studies can be more spread out. I guess it depends on whether you're focused on curriculum or pedagogy. But usually there's a very long run in time, so maybe a couple of months, maybe a whole school term, where there are lots of collaborative meetings discussing and thinking about what the lesson study will be on. So the lessons themselves are maybe more of just the product of those discussions, testing things out, and then reflecting on how effective those have been. So I don't have a problem with a weekly kind of cycle. I can see that working if it's a lesson that repeats every week, because that is then a normal kind of project. I can also see a value in if you take, for example, a language module, and you have a language lesson every day, and you want to develop the pedagogy of teaching a specific type of language, then the lesson studies are going to need to be every day that week. So it can be very, very intense and very stressful, but the data is all collected within 1 week, and then it can be digested on a longer period of time, because if it's a topic that only repeats once a year, then you have to use the opportunity. So I think lesson study is incredibly flexible. You just have to think about what's the right cycle for the question and the problem that you have as a team. And I think that's going back to before we said the leader being important. The leader then has to make that happen. So if it's a week of lessons and you need the teachers all together for a whole week, that's maybe more difficult than once a week for a period of time, or spread out throughout the course of a year, because some lesson studies can be much slower. So I think it's lesson study is a method, a tool we can use for these kind of problem solving things.
All right. So that you mentioned the topic and the research question, let's discuss this a little bit. In Kazakhstan, the teachers prefer to use this kind of formula, if you wish. So they would say like how this, like something positive, would solve this something negative. Like, let's say, how written instructions in like doing laboratory work in chemistry in the 8th grade would improve something in their skills. So how does this usually work in your countries? Do teachers have this kind of research question that they formulate before they do lesson study, or do you use something else?
That's a good question.
Or what are the possible examples? Maybe you would bring an example of some research question that your teachers were investigating.
So I like the example of a very specific question. I think maybe our cycles start with a much broader theme, and then the question is formed as that theme is explored. So it could be something like, how does using map manipulative help children think in English language lessons? So it would be more, I suppose, evaluative than good and bad elements. So I think it's not necessarily saying that there's a problem in terms of what's being delivered already, but more about a way, does this help us support further development and growth? Because I think within all professional development, we need to remember sometimes what we're doing is already the right thing. And sometimes doing something different is just a change rather than actually development. So we have to be careful that within our lesson study cycle, we give ourselves the ability to be like, actually what we were doing was really good and we should stick with doing that rather than making a change to this thing. But this thing was interesting to explore. So it's giving the autonomy back to the teachers to say, actually, this is the tool I want to use for this lesson, for this class, because that will be different for every single teacher in every single year that they're teaching, especially in primary school when you have different children. The next year, you might teach the same curriculum, but it's a different group of children. So you can't teach the exact same way. You can't teach them with the same resources. You have to be constantly thinking, so what happens in one year might be perfect for you. Trying out a new idea that doesn't really work with one group, but you can then add to your toolbox, I think is a very clever thing for teachers to be doing as they have a very long career, and then hopefully as they progress they become even more experienced and then they can help other people.
It's interesting because like in Kazakhstan the primary school teacher stays with the same group of students for 4 years, so they are together like all the time. So they don't like teach only the first year or the second year,
which can give them a really good understanding of progression, but also means it's very challenging, I guess, to become really skilled at one grade.
It is, I totally agree. But if for the research, it's quite interesting how they use the same tool and see how this differentiation in age can influence on this or that, on understanding, on their skills and things like that. So the research topic in Thailand, is there such a thing? How do you do this? Or
at the beginning, when we introduced the lesson study, we call lesson study approach. We did not focus on the research aspect at the beginning because, as I mentioned, in our context we have a lot of problem about teaching approach. We still teach knowledge to the student, so we try to improve the way our teacher teach mathematics. We focus on mathematics. So when I introduce the new teaching approach, I call open approach. So in order to improve the open approach, like pose the problem situation and then let students learning together, solve the problem, and then for whole class discussion and do some reflection. This is the basic 4 step of open approach. Then I put this as I mentioned, in the second step of 3 steps of lesson study. So in that sense, the objects of the lesson study is try to improve the every step of the open approach, not directly to improve the quality of the lessons by focusing on the research aspect. For the first 10 years also, it is quite different in this.
To try to change the teacher's behavior in the classroom.
That's our big research question at the beginning.
Yeah, but because our teachers, when they start lesson study, they think about the research question, and then sometimes they think that maybe they think about the research question too much, because they think, well, maybe this instrument, maybe not, let's try this instrument, and they spend quite a lot of time on formulating, on giving the right formula of this research question. But on the other hand, it gives them a little bit of frame, so they go deep into literature review, observation only on this topic, and then they focus really during the lesson observation of what they are looking at, not the whole class, but this in particular. So yeah, we all go our own way. There is no right or wrong. Yes, as we say. Okay, so we discussed with you the research questions, and I'm interested in how have you ever tried, like you focusing on math teachers, and as far as I understand, for you it's not necessarily math, it's like any kind of subject. I would say that in Kazakhstan it's more common that we have mixed groups of teachers who teach different subjects but with the same students. So have you ever tried this? What do you think is the better way to work, only like teachers of one subject or teachers of different subjects? What are the benefits, draws and backs?
We basically need many teachers from different subjects together. First thing, they have different vision or different view of students from different subjects, so they can mix it together in the plan, so they can, better anticipating a student's idea, or what should I say? Maybe I think they have many ideas in that plan is better than just only think about only one subject student teachers. So it's better for the school to do that.
Yeah, I can elaborate at this point. In our case, in Thailand, our teachers still have I say the belief that we give the problem to the student and the student solves that problem. But to my knowledge, for Japanese teachers, the problem cannot be given to the student. So we should sharply distinguish between what the teacher prepare and the student authentic problem. So in our case, we try to, for a group, to our lesson study team from any subject. In the case of elementary school, they teach every subject, so they teach together. They plan, to design I call problem situation, not a problem. A problem situation is a kind of one certain problem situation that open to accommodate the student idea. It doesn't matter in any subject, because the problem situation itself is not depend on the subject, but depend on the condition we design. We have two components of the problem situation: the context that's meaningful to the student. So the teacher discuss what kind of context that's meaningful to the student. And then the other part, the other component is the condition. We design the condition in terms of a short and precise instruction, so that the student can do the experiment through that instruction. So we create the thing that the student can learn together. Then the teachers can observe the student idea and go through the 4 step of open approach. That what we focus.
I think it's really interesting how you're working in Kazakhstan in terms of multiple teachers with the same children. I think that's really interesting. I guess in Scotland we can do that. We also do teachers who teach the same grade level. We can look at teachers who teach the same subjects. So we have examples of like physics case studies, particularly for exam classes, or one of my colleagues is working on music. But actually it's really interesting for some of us in Scotland, because Scotland is a relatively small population with a relatively big space. And we have lots of island schools and schools in the far north, which are further away. So we actually also use lesson study, which is maybe not even teachers who teach the same grades or in the same schools or even the same part of the countries, but they come together through digital means to do their lesson studies. And so that might involve video recordings of classes, and that gives more distance and time for us to analyze and think about things, and gives more of an objective focus. I don't think there's one right answer. I think it's interesting to get different perspectives. I think it depends what your question is again, and how you're using the participants of the lesson study to kind of really understand that question. So in a mixed group like you described, do you then also do they teach them in different subjects, or does it happen within one subject that they're all observing, or does that vary as well?
Usually it's different subjects. For instance, one lesson study group that I'm mentoring, let's say. So they look at the argumentation, how students can bring a really good argument. So we have this teacher of global perspectives, the teacher of biology, the teacher of physical education, the teacher of English. And in all those subjects, students have to formulate arguments, and they use the same way, like there is claim, reasoning, evidence, and all these things. But the good thing about this, that the students have an idea that all the teachers are, following the same line. So they understand that, so this skill, like making an argument, can be useful, is not just for global perspective or not just for biology. So it's actually for all the subjects, and all these cross-subject things are happening. Yeah, but the example that you mentioned is really interesting. You have written several papers about digital, like online lesson study. That is the reason. Because, for example, in the north of Kazakhstan, where I'm from, we have many schools that are also kind of far away from civilization, let's say, and there are no schools around. Or during the winter time, there is so much snow that they cannot actually leave their geographical place. And in these schools, there is usually just one teacher of physics or one teacher of math, if they're lucky enough. So it's kind of impossible to make like the group of 3 or 4 of teachers of the same subject. Or even they don't have several teachers of elementary school, so there would be usually just one teacher. So yeah, we have very different ideas because Kazakhstan is so large, and the situation is very different everywhere.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting, because then you've got the pandemic to thank, how we can work more closely together. And I guess there's also international lesson study that we maybe haven't explored in the same way. Teachers from different countries working together on the same problems in different contexts.
Exactly. Like, for example, argument. It's a good thing to explore in Thailand or in Scotland, anywhere in the world. And it doesn't depend on the curriculum, on the content of the textbook. Like, all students need to have it. Okay, let's do it. So let's collaborate. All right. So my next question is... So we discussed the research question, the different types of lesson study, grouping of how you do it. How about sustainability? Do you think it's important that the same teacher is involved in lesson study, I don't know, for how many, like every week, that's for entire of her career, or she should stop at some point and do something else? So what do you think is the best way of organizing?
Yeah, shall I go first this time? So I say no. I don't think you need to be involved in lesson study every single year of your career. I also don't think you need to be involved in every cycle that happens in your school. I think you need to somehow know the lesson study is happening and get somehow feedback from this. But I don't think you need to be always the person doing the lesson study to learn from lesson study. And I think this is where your principal comes into play. Because if a lesson study is happening in your school or part of your school with some teachers, then there should be opportunities throughout that lesson study for the team to share what they're learning when they're studying, what they're sharing when they've done the lessons, what they've shared in their reflections, to present at the end of the process so that everybody can learn from the same thing. And then if you have the right culture of collaboration in your school, then you can be learning from lesson study without doing lesson study. And then you can kind of use lesson study in different ways. Lesson study can then become about improving practice for maybe newer teachers. It can also then become about solving difficult problems, like wicked problems for like educators, like argument. Or it can be just a really interesting professional development thing for teachers to do. But you might also need a year to just kind of continue working on what you've already found out from lesson study before and building those skills and restoring them. And I think that it comes back to what I mentioned before. Sometimes a rest is as good as a change. And then you can come back to a new lesson study cycle thinking, actually, I feel really confident with my teaching of argument now. What's next? And I think that we have to remember that you can work really, really hard as a teacher and do a really good job. And then you can work really, really hard as a teacher and do lesson study and do a good job. But if we keep making teachers do both things all of the time, we might end up having teachers who don't want to be teachers anymore because they're just doing too many things. And it's better to do it a few times really, really well than every year just because we have to do it.
Okay. So
It's maybe controversial.
In project school in Thailand, sometimes we set the project period or 2 years or 3 years, and we bring the lesson study and open approach into the project. And of course, teachers may ask that how long we gonna do this, how long we going to continue. So, and Professor Mighty always said, continue until you stop. So it mean if you do the lesson study and open approach in your school and do it in your classroom and you face some experience that change with the student and you feel satisfying with the change, and you can see the student face that change from the past, and do you want to continue even the project is end? So that's up to school. If you decide to continue, yes, keep doing. So that's how Professor Mighty always said.
Yes, I'm very serious about how to sustain. And after I got back from Japan, then I planned a 30-year project in order to sustain a lesson study in Thailand. So we have a big gap between the university-based teacher education, the initial teacher trainings, and the in-service education in our country. We have a big gap. So when we do lesson study, we work with a collaborative school. We design which school that will work with our university. So when we start in 2006, we did the numbers of like 2 schools and then create 4 schools. We scale up like a very small number when we scale up the collaborative school. So far we have like 300 schools across the country that working together in our network. So I have a dream that we can have like a professional learning community, not like the teacher working alone as we used to. So in order to sustain and build up the professional learning community, then I'm create a weekly cycle. We can many layer of professional learning community. The PLC 1 and 2 at the school level, and then with the leadership of school principal, they works like the district-based lesson study with a number of school nearby that school, And then I myself create a national open class that we invite a number of schools. We do open class or public lesson every year. So we have so far we have 17 national open class every year. And then we have PLC 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It means that we try to involve school teachers, school principal, and a teacher educator to attend the WALS conference. Also this year we a group of 11 came together.
Yeah. You are all from the same university, correct?
No.
There are teachers as well, right?
Teachers and also
Principal.
Principal, school principal,
Northeastern.
Yes, Northeastern.
Oh, that's amazing. Great job. So John already mentioned this thing about sharing. So you can learn from lesson study, not necessarily participating in lesson study, but because lesson study is happening in your school. So how do you deal with it? For example, in Kazakhstan, as I showed you on the map, every region has got Center of Excellence. And every year we try to organize regional conferences where teachers can share through demonstrating their posters or paper presentations or in any other way, and we have national conference. So how does this sharing is it happening in your countries?
Yeah, so it's relatively new for Scotland, but we have now a lesson study network, and we share online the learnings from lesson study through this network. So this is participant-led, so it can be researchers, teachers, principals, people who work with schools in local areas, sharing the things that they have done with lesson study. And these are sessions maybe up for an hour that anybody can come to, and they're free to attend. And so gradually this will build, and then we'll have more opportunities for sharing these things. And then we can link into some of the national devices for sharing, where we have teachers' inquiries that are published on a website, and so people can go in and explore these as well. And then new teachers can also explore those ideas. And the idea behind this sharing is that we don't have to keep answering the same question, but actually if we have found a good answer to a question, we can share the answer to the question as well, and people can then learn from that and maybe develop that question even further. But as I said, it's very new, and we've just started the network this last year, so we'll see how it grows. I'm very jealous of all the centers of excellence.
The other thing that we recommend is that the teachers, when, for example, they work with the same level of students, like 7th grades, different teachers, and they had some findings within the year of lesson study. So they write a small manual or a small book that is kept in the library of the school. So the next teachers who are going to take the same kids or the same grade, they already have the answers published, and they can use it. And that's how we change the content of the libraries, of the school libraries, which is not just for students but also for teachers, and something that they create themselves. All right, so how does it work in Thailand? Do you have any conferences or meetings?
We sharing through the idea of open class. In our perspective, usually the class is closed. So we start to open the class through the first levels of learning community. Each lesson study team, you have to open your class for other invite people. Then in the next levels, at the district level, then we do open class. Then at the national level, we do open. So we sharing through the open class. We invite the teachers from a various school to teach and work as a team before we open the class. So in that sense, we sharing. So every so you see every week, every semester between the district lesson study, and then every year, and then we bring our school teachers and teacher educator to go to Japan every year. We have some collaborative project between Thai government and Japanese government. So we bring them and he do translators. So in that sense, we sharing the lesson study in our community.
Yeah. So you're lucky enough that you are close to Japan. It's not really possible for our countries, for instance, to visit Japan that often. We are not there yet, by the way. I'm talking about the open classes, because teachers are more eager to present their work in PowerPoint or in the poster rather than inviting so many people in their classrooms. Maybe because previously we had this system of open lessons. I don't know if you had this, where people would come, to evaluate, to judge your teaching. And so we don't do that often, but I think this is also an important thing to do. So maybe we have enough experience
but
now.
In fact, we open class is not the place where we do evaluations.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, but I mean, people not necessarily from lesson study group can come and observe. Yes, and so there would be some anyway outsiders inside the classroom that you need to invite.
I think it's all the same idea, though, isn't it? So your books in the library, this open lesson is all an example of knowledge management and how we coordinate them. And I always think about, I guess, Eric Chung's work in terms of this, in terms of like anything we can do to share knowledge between teachers is going to be helpful. And for some it will be reading, for some it will be seeing, and for some I guess it will be hearing from colleagues in the staff rooms and just talking, because teachers talk about work. Their relationships all know this. So I think that it's always a good thing to give lots of different possibilities to share them, as long as the knowledge is being shared.
Yeah.
I think that's the key thing. So as long as we've got it happening somewhere, and then we can continue to evolve our systems and processes, learn from each other. I will take the books back to Scotland and say, make a little book for your library. Because you're right, the libraries and schools are just for the children in Scotland. So actually, how can we make them more purposeful for everybody that's in the building? So these are good ideas, and we should just be kind of thinking, actually, let's continue to borrow ideas from each other and reuse them.
During the pandemics, when we do open class, because we do hybrid, right? So we record a classroom video and then some edit, but you can access anywhere. And sometimes we invite Japanese teachers to in the class and do some comment, and then he do some subtitle in English. So you can use those for
And the video is so powerful, because even if you're explaining something, sometimes people just want to see, what is it that you mean? Are they already doing it? And I guess teachers even watching themselves is such a powerful thing to do. I know they hate it, but like actually when they watch themselves, they're like, oh, I do that thing. I don't face the class when I'm talking to them, and they often are able to self-correct based on their learning, and then that will make a real difference to their practice. And it's these fears we have, of being judged as teachers or worried about being observed in different ways. I think we have to overcome for lots of our teachers. So I think the more we can use the video or digital means to be able to watch back and think about things in more detail, the better we'll get at teaching generally.
He do a lot of translators, a Japanese classroom and with the subtitle, so you can access to that in some part.
Where do you have it, on your university website, or where it is?
Yes, we have in our website. You can access.
And you're saying subtitles are both in English as well?
It's still only Thai language now. So
But we can do.
So you can make this available to us as well.
So that people can make use of sometimes a deep learning in some Japanese classroom. Last time we used that classroom video for teacher training. Just last week before we came here, we organized a teacher training in Bangkok for the whole week, and I asked him to do subtitles with a Japanese classroom.
And the funny thing is, before teachers start the real class, we keep talking that for the first step and the second step is the time for the student. So teacher needs to shut your
Shut.
mouth,
Yeah.
and teachers go into the classroom, and when they start the step 2, which is should be students' time, they still talking and interrupt with the students' ideas, and they realize when they watch the video after that that it's quite it sounds easy, but when you stand in the classroom, it's not that easy.
And even if you ask them, they would say, "No, I was silent. I didn't say a word." But then when they watch the video, they're like, "Oh my God, is it really me? I'm talking." Like all
But
the
these are all the tools we can use, aren't they? So this is quite helpful.
Yeah, the same thing.
We ask them in our 4 step of open approach. In the second step, we should act in a please keep it silent and change your role to observe the student idea with the evidence. But they always try to help the student to solve the problem.
Yeah, even the observers, like in the lesson study groups, they don't do that often now, but in the beginning they would interact with the students as well, the observers, and they would try to help the students and interact into the conversations and whatever. So we had to have these strict rules for observations, like the do's and don'ts. So stay away, don't
We
talk
do the
to
same
students.
thing.
The same thing.
Last week, we list up the do and don't.
So, all right. We have discussed really nice questions with you, and I have many more. Unfortunately, we don't have so much time, and I'm sure that you will have an opportunity to discuss more when the conference starts. And I don't know, I think it's gonna be a little bit unique conference in terms that we have more than 400 participants from Kazakhstan, and like 99% of them are teachers, so they don't expect to meet too many professors from universities. Maybe 10 or 12 of them will attend, but the teacher community is huge, and they are very willing in participating in lesson study and learn about it. But what do you think, how important it is, like that's going to be my last question, the role of university professors or someone who is leading the lesson study group, or can they do that just by themselves? So you're helping your teachers, right? You are there with them. You are there with them as well. So do you think they can do it by themselves?
In our case, we have the ultimate goal that the university should work closely with the school. So we try many years to bridge this gap. So we don't things that we let them do by themselves, because we send our student teachers from the first year, the second year and third year to work with that collaborative school. So we work together. So it's another meanings of lesson study. Not just let them go, but we work together.
Okay.
So how about?
I think that it's a very difficult question. It's a good question to ask at the end of a podcast. I think that yes, in theory, teachers can do things by themselves. The challenge that we have is always going to be the limitations to that learning. We need to make sure that we're not just learning from having a difference with the person we're talking to. We need to add something into lesson study. So it doesn't have to be a university professor. It doesn't have to be a more experienced teacher. It can be a really good book or podcast or something that gets the teachers thinking. And then that adds more knowledge into the cycle. So we're adding an enrichment of experience. And then from that studying of that will come the professional development, the change that we're looking for. So I think we can, but we have to be really careful that we don't just assume that a cycle of people being in the same room is a productive collaboration. We have to make sure that the productive collaboration comes from adding something in. Otherwise, it can be a very nice cup of tea that we're drinking together and telling each other how great we are as teachers. But did we learn anything when we walk away from that room? So I think it's really important we make sure that we have the added stuff.
Yeah, I do agree with John. We also have the idea of we should be in the same front line. at the classroom. Even I, as a university professor, but when I am in the classroom, I also a teacher to give some perspective, not just only outside people just come into the class. So it's to make the classes beneficial for sharing for everyone. So we should be teachers at that moment, not a university professor. And we, our student teachers, to learn a lot from the practice from the beginning of their career. Do you want to add something?
Because I have job opportunity to go to school and observe, and I try to I didn't go for evaluate or something, but try to support them and be nice with them so they can continue the project or doing the lesson study, keep going with the whole school. So go with the friendly, quite friendly. Yeah.
Well, these are really good answers and some food for thought during the conference, and not only. Unfortunately, again, we will have to finish our podcast, but I would like to thank you so very much for coming here and talking to me. For me personally, it was absolutely amazing conversation. I learned so much from you, so thank you for bringing this experience to this conversation. And I wish you a very great conference, finding new network, friends, and of course, enjoy Kazakhstan. We are really trying to make everything possible so that you would enjoy your experience here, because for Kazakh people, if the guests are satisfied, then the Kazakhs are happy. So we hope you will enjoy your experience here, and thank you again for coming and finding time.
Thank you for inviting us. Our precious, even if it's the first time to Kazakhstan, we very enjoyed.
Thank you.